Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the students for coming out. Students are always really excited to connect with you alumni, and we look up to you. And one day, we'll be joining your group very soon. I will be joining you as an alumni in May 2013. That's right. And just welcome back home. So thank you for being here. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, Jill, to have this wonderful conversation. And thank you, President Chris, for such a wonderful introduction. So let's begin. So just reflecting on your time before Smith, coming to Smith, when you entered the Smith presidency, women's colleges were going through an incredibly transitional time period. Male colleges were going co-ed, and they were beginning to admit women students. And during this time period, the place of a women's college had shifted, and Smith had to reevaluate the importance of a women's education. Given all of your professional accomplishments and all the options that you've had professionally, you chose Smith during this very important time period in history. And so I just wanted to ask you, why was this the perfect time to join the Smith community? And how did you come to make such a decision?
Thank you, Yasmin. It's a wonderful question. And like all explanations of people's behavior, it's a complex story. First of all, when my husband and I were married, we made a deal that every 10 years the other person could say where we lived. And John, being older, had taken the first 10 years to do some important things he wanted to do in the academic world in Canada, and it was my turn. So I was thinking about moving back to an American university. My field of study was 19th and 20th century American social and intellectual history, and in some discussions about where to go, when my closest academic friend, Natalie Zeman Davis, an alumna of Smith, came to me and said, I just learned from my reunion that there will be a search for a new president of Smith, and I think you should be interested in it. And she was one of the most, was and is one of the most amazing scholars that I know and of her generation. So whatever she said to me, I took quite seriously. But on the other hand, I didn't really know Smith very well, and I was a little bit uncertain about it. My husband, on the other hand, had spent a long time at Harvard College as a housemaster, and he believed that this was exactly the right thing for me to do. I, of course, was very keen to get back to my research and writing. I'd spent the previous 3 years as one of the vice presidents of the University of Toronto, very large institution, 3 campuses, mainly public supported. And I'd been able to do some interesting things in supporting women students, and of course particularly women evening students who worked a full-time job, raised a family, and were trying to study. But really, I was captivated in another way. In my own research, I had read just about everything Mary Lyon ever wrote that was published, and likewise, I had read just about everything I could find out about Sophia Smith. And the notion that these institutions created by these extraordinary women was under any question of viability did concern me very much. I don't know how many of you know that Mary Lyon walked through all the hill towns raising the money to found Mount Holyoke. I have a house out in one of the hill towns, and I go hiking there regularly. And every time I'm puffing my way up a hill, I think about Mary Lyon. She didn't have Nikes. And of course, I think about Sophia Smith being sort of bullied by her minister and her lawyer to give her estate to Amherst College. And she stuck it out and wouldn't bend. And so it troubled me to think that the institutions created by these extraordinary women were under any question of their viability. So all those things combined, plus a visit to the campus and meeting a lot of Smith students, led to that decision. And I believed that it was possible to use women's colleges as a launching pad for various kinds of studies about how women learn, women's education, new fields. And I also felt that it would be possible, as indeed it has proved to be, to mobilize the alumni in ways that hadn't been done before in order to make sure that these institutions were viable. Long answer.
But excellent, though. Thank you, Jill. Very thorough. And that's a perfect segue to my next question that pertains to the present and the past of Smith. In your book, A Women's Education, you write, "I want to help build an educational system that make intellectual maturity possible for all women." And I believe that still very much holds true to today. Given your creation of the Ada Comstock Scholar Program and the affirmation of women's studies program as a legitimate form of studies in academia, what do you think the purpose of a women's education in the 21st century for Smith is? And how does this differ or relate to the challenges faced during the 1970s and 1980s? And also, one last part of the question, what does it mean to take Smith in the 21st century?
Well, another historian's answer to begin with. It's very important, I think, for people concerned with women's education to understand that feminism as a social movement is cyclical. We happen to be living in an anti-cycle moment. If you think about what's being said about women's right to abortion, an effort to redefine rape, we are living in one of the anti-cycles. And so it is important to have well-established, viable institutions which can ride through movements of what I would call backsliding about the question of the equality of women and men. So one reason why I thought it very important to make Smith as financially strong and as intellectually adventurous as possible was my awareness that there needs to be a firm base where people concerned with women's education can draw on resources and mobilize them to move counterculturally to the negative environment. And anybody who has listened to the various so-called debates will will be aware that we are living in a time of real retreat on the part of one segment of this society from women's freedom. So I thought that in coming to Smith, I would be able to build it in ways that would make it more or less impregnable to those negative eras, and on the same token, able to generate and deal with those negative depictions of women in a way that was historically sound and enormously persuasive. So that was one of the things that I thought was Smith's mission, and it is true today that we are in a negative cycle, and anybody who thinks that argument is finished is totally mistaken. It started out in the Enlightenment in the 18th century. Enlightenment replaced by Romanticism and the focus on women's erotic life, and that movement responded to by early feminist efforts to educate women and bring them into the professions, but lots of hostility to be overcome in all those changes. So I see Smith, as it was in the past, today, still a bastion of knowledge, learning, commitment, and determination to sustain a dignified and open view of women's role in society. So as you think about this institution, remember the cycles. There has not been a time in recorded history when we did not have these swings of opinion. It's just a matter of thrust and counter-thrust. And I don't believe, because we are differently embodied, that argument and succession of political movements will ever go away. So Smith will be as necessary 3 or 4 centuries from now as it is today, or as it has been. And I think most people who work in the history of women, as I have done, are as convinced as I am that the cycles will continue because there are many forces in society opposed to women's freedom. There are, of course, religious ones, there are economic ones, and there are political ones. And the likelihood that they will all be resolved in favor of freedom for women forever seems to me very remote. So that is number one reason why it is so important to build and strengthen this institution and others like it. I think it is important to see that today the wonderful vision of Sophia Smith for educating women can now be globalized. Smith is strong enough to do that, and it has the great backing of many alumni I know, and its current campaign, very current, just yesterday, is going to be one that is devoted in many ways to enabling Smith to globalize its wonderful history and mission. So what do I think the nature of the college and its understanding of itself should be today? I think it should look back to its history, celebrate its achievements, gird on whatever armor is necessary, and just set out to do for women around the world, particularly poor women, what it has already done in the United States and in its support of women's studies and their learning internationally, but now globally.
Okay then, Jill. Excellent. Thank you. Excellent rally cry. This weekend, during the Women of the World campaign, myself and a lot of my peers, we've been reflecting on how Smith has prepared us for ultimately the challenges of the 21st century. And just thinking about my journey here at Smith, I'm a senior graduating in May, as stated earlier, and I've done everything that I'm supposed to do as a student. I do my work. I was in the library for 10 hours yesterday, finished a group project. I'm here working at this campaign, and I'm a part of the SGA, and so many activities across campus. And so, although I've done all these things to better myself, my community, and around me locally and globally, this does not alleviate my qualms for the future. I still have qualms about it. Can I get a job after college? Am I at the level in which I can be competitive? And with this in mind, this is why I take the campaign so seriously. And one Smith alum put it, Smithies are born and hope that they make their way to Northampton. Excellent quote, excellent quote. So given this changing world and this dynamic of very smart, strong women emerging to these leadership positions, how do you think that the graduates of 2013 are different from the graduates of 1970, and how much, or 1975 in particular, and how might this campaign address those disparities and continue this path that women are on in the world?
What a wonderful question. I think the difference between the graduates of the 1970s and today's graduates, is mainly to be found in the way the college has understood and created the institutions to give women the best possible advice about how to understand their future career, and all the best kind of aids to pursuing whatever career they are interested in. When I arrived at Smith in 1975, interviewers from Fortune 500 companies came through the valley. They went to Amherst, and they went right by Smith and Mount Holyoke up to Dartmouth and then over to Williams, and they never even thought of interviewing women and considering them for corporate positions. Today, I think there is a very strong counseling service and employment aid for Smith graduates, and they are, as we see from all the reunions I come to, many of them now are very active in that world. A great positive for all of us, because they're higher earning and they remember where they were educated. But I think today Smith is different in the most significant possible way in its awareness of the rest of the world. We did have always, from the early 20th century, the famous junior year programs, from which Smith women benefited, but not possibly in very large numbers. And I think if you had asked somebody in the entering class the year I came a series of questions about Southeast Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa and the economic and social problems and the lives of women, they'd have had trouble answering. But I don't believe that's true today. And I think that is one of the great benefits of the leadership that Carol has given to making this institution committed to global education. So Yasmin, you're different in the kind of curriculum you've been educated in or through. You're different in your awareness of a global society and in your intellectual and emotional preparation for wanting to be a very active participant in that. And I believe Smith is graduating more and more women like you. Maybe none as good as you, but like you.
Oh, Jill, thank you. Very nice. But my colleagues, my peers are quite outstanding as well, too, I must say. So, in regards to the alumni community and the students that you've worked so hard with during your time here at Smith and after your presidency, you've built a significant community which laid the foundation for the alumni network. And through your networks, you have amassed a lot of money through fundraising to bring more attention to the school on a both domestic and international level. And from this weekend alone, the relationship between students and alums is such an integral part of the Smith experience. So how do you foresee this relationship continuing to grow and become stronger as a result of this campaign?
I think this is one of the most important questions we could all talk about and think about. While I was president, I worked very hard, against a good deal of criticism, to spend the money to create a database of alumni electronically that could be constantly upgraded and which contained more information than our usual alumni data contained. We tried to find out where people worked, what their position was, what their level of experience was in whatever setting they were working, so that when graduation time came, or senior year, there was a way to go to that network and find 10, 20, 30 women who were doing something that you thought you'd like to do, and who were willing to be contacted and to be mentors. And I thought this was very important because, of course, I knew how those networks worked for graduates of formerly all-male colleges. And there's a good deal of information back then that it didn't work quite so well once those institutions became coeducational. And women didn't get quite the same kind of support. So I thought we had to go to work quickly to create that network. Lots of people used it. I don't know whether they do still. If they'd graduated and decided they were going to move to California, didn't know anybody there, go to the network, say you're a Smith alum coming into town, and you arrive with a different status than you do if you just get off the bus. That was an effort to create a relationship that was sort of managed by the college. What I think has happened, which is so wonderful, is that the relationship between current students and alumni is growing ever stronger as Smith, as an institution, begins to expand the area of its efforts to deal with social problems, issues relating to women. So I think there is an ongoing conversation today which is enormously valuable for both sides. And so I think for all of us, the possibility of building ever closer relationships is one of the good things about the wired world. Electronically, it's so much easier to do and takes so little effort. But I have noticed in just walking around and talking to people this evening how impressed the alumni participants here have been by current students and their aspirations and the breadth of their knowledge. So in one sense, the expanded curriculum and the opportunity for students to do much more independent work has led to a maturer graduate who can connect more easily to women who are already active in their working lives. So remember to use it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we move on to questions from the audience, there's one more question that I really want to ask you. It's the $1,000,000 question for me. As a student representative on the Presidential Search Committee, currently Smith is undergoing a search for a new leader for the next decade or so. And I cannot help to ask, but what do you look for within a new president at Smith, and how might this new era of Smith leadership continue the Women for the World campaign as Smith hopes to become a more internationalized institution? And what are your hopes for the recipients of this scholarship?
Well, it's impossible to say specifically what a new president should or should not be. I think it is very clear that the search will be concerned with finding somebody with the range of interests domestically and internationally that are thriving today. I'm sure the search committee will look for somebody who has their own very strong and clear ideas about all the issues we've been talking about. I also think that the profile of Smith in the world today is so much broader, deeper, and so much more widespread that I know it will attract an even larger pool of potentially interested people than has been the case in the past. That's about all I can say on that subject.
Okay, perfect. Well, sounds like I'm doing my job, and so are the search committee members, so I think we're on target. Thank you, Jill, so much. And that concludes my questions for Jill. But if anyone in the audience has questions, feel free to walk up to the podium or the microphone and ask your questions. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. Thank you.
And hello, Jill. I'm Joan Buell from Portland, Oregon, class of 1954. I once took you to visit my great aunt, Mabel Strong, when she was the oldest living graduate of Smith. The question of men is interesting.
I think we all agree.
I think so, too.
I ended up yesterday feeling we have to be very careful not to generalize too much and demonize them, poor things. Many of us would not have been able to do what we did without them. My husband consented to have our family be a one-salary family for 7 years while I was helping start an inpatient hospice. Do you think Smith might ever have a man president again? What can we do to keep the balance?
Well, that's a very important and interesting question. I think that I know many males who have a very highly developed sense of the need for equal relationships between the sexes. I think all of us know such people, and I've certainly met in my work in the not-for-profit world men who have given up all sorts of economic opportunities in order to pursue some aspect of social justice or better health care or many other important activities. So I think it's possible that there would be splendid candidates. But I do think for a woman's institution to have as the final authority a board of trustees and a highly talented women leader presents a profile that doesn't require explanation. And I certainly know many faculty who are the least sexist people I could ever come across. and know them as teachers and leaders of this institution internally. But the symbolic impact of having the leader be a man is something I think should probably be studied very carefully.
I wasn't sure. Was that question for me too, or? Oh, okay, okay. Well, I think that's a fascinating question. This was one of my interview questions when Dean Mahoney was interviewing me along with a few of the class deans within College Hall. And I think men are allies to the institution, absolutely. I don't think you're able to push such a mission, such a Smith, for such a long time without men. I think that historically we have had a whole entire history of just having only male leaders. And Jill, you began our new tradition of having a woman leader in the 20th century. It's a thought-provoking question. Unfortunately, this is all I can say right now. I'm held to strict confidentiality, but it's an idea to think of. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beena, class of 95. I'm from Pakistan. I wanted to come here to thank you for this wonderful scholarship fund you set up for international students. I'm a little emotional because it's something that's very dear to our heart.
I understand.
And for someone to have the vision and to understand that the financial aid that we have for international students is so little that it just doesn't do the applicants justice. So for you to have understood that and for the president to have realized that, that's just incredible. I mean, the jump is phenomenal. And I think it'll make a big difference in the development world. And coming from a woman who is part of the Muslim world is very important. So thank you very much.
Well, let me tell you. Don't go away. One of the reasons why I've always wanted to develop scholarship funds for third world women is that my own life was absolutely transformed. I was living in Australia. I wanted to come and study in the United States. I didn't have the money to do it on my own. And so I applied in the first year that the Fulbright Foundation ever allowed women to apply for a travel grant to come to the United States. And I applied to 3 American graduate schools for admission. And the best offer I received was from the Radcliffe College then, graduate school, since merged into Harvard. But those 2 things transformed my life. So I understand completely why you were so concerned.
No, it is because, you see, like Sharmeen said the other day, we come from a very privileged class of women in our countries, but the education we get at Smith gives us the ability to transform our countries. And that's what's important. And you don't get it. And there are other women out there who are not as privileged as we are, and that's a chance that they can get. So thank you very much.
Thank you for talking.
Hello. First, thank you so much for all your comments, wonderful comments, and this wonderful weekend. The planning committee, I can't imagine the work they did to make this event happen. I'm Amy, I'm class of 98, and I'm a neuroscientist, but I'm also a mom. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, class of 2029 and 2027. Something that's near and dear to my heart and many in my decade is the work, the balance, the wanting to have it all, the wanting to have the career. I go up for tenure next year, but also having the family. And what I'm interested in hearing your opinion on is what we can do, what Smith can do to support women in all of their choices that they make, whether it be mothering, career, or some combination of the 2.
Thank you. That's just a wonderful question. What we can do, I think, is study and publicize some of the issues that are raised by the problems that women have who work full-time and want to care for their children. It's not a problem for people in France. The state assumes the responsibility for funding wonderful childcare from infancy on. The reason for that is that the male population of France was wiped out in the 1914-18 war. And so fertility and building up the population was a national priority. I always say to people today, whenever they complain about the possibility of using tax revenues to support childcare, that nobody protests huge taxes to create the national road system and allow more automobiles to spill more emissions. But nobody wants to consider using tax revenues for a general societal commitment to the next generation. And one of the things that saddened me most about the so-called debates is that everybody is trading insults about a subject of the deepest social and political importance. So, so I hope somewhere in the Smith population, perhaps among graduates of this era, there's somebody who's willing to take on leading that fight. It goes right alongside, in my mind, the battle to preserve the environment. They are both equally important. But we have a political system that is absolutely blind to the issues that exist today. But I hope you've got some good daycare and a decent enough salary to be able to pay for it.
Thank you.
And we have time for 2 more questions.
Hi. First of all, oops, sorry. In terms of alumni directory, it's definitely in use, so no worries. That's alive and well, and myself and a lot of alums use that a lot. My name's Amanda. I'm class of 2009. I have to say I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, because Texans are proud. But I live and work in DC now. And I wanted to bring some attention back to domestic issues. Throughout the weekend, we've heard a lot about international concerns and education parity across the world. But I think I want to hear more about what you think about domestic issues in terms of, for example, Arizona, where we have books that are being banned, you know, and that's very backwards, like you were saying, an anti-cycle, a negative cycle. And in terms of Smith's role with things like that going on and the racism and the sexism from elected officials, you know, that say, you know, like a representative from Kansas saying, you know, we'll shoot immigrants like pigs, or you have people saying women, you know, they don't know what they're doing, or they need to have XYZ before they have access to certain services, or being intimidated and voter intimidation. We have all these issues domestic as well. How do you see Smith bringing more awareness on campus and not just saying, oh, that's going on over there in the Middle East and in Africa, but we have similar, unfortunately, issues here in one of the richest countries and most privileged countries in the world. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that and Smith's role with helping to bring that awareness.
Well, you're raising a very important question. There are 3 things I'd like to use to frame my answer. The first is, because we live in such a politically charged environment about things having to do with women and the family, it's important for an institution like Smith to approach those questions in a way that doesn't undermine its tax-exempt status, because that would destroy the institution. So we have to figure out ways to work on this subject that do not undermine what we already possess here. And my response to your question is we should use every opportunity we have in teaching about social issues to highlight that one. And I don't know how many faculty are here today, but I do know quite a number who do. Yeah. But secondly, I think we have to keep on encouraging Smith alumni to run for public office.
Right.
Because that's the way I think we'll achieve the change. And, you know, we have some notable examples like Gloria Steinem, who has been a leader in issues relating to women throughout her whole life. And we need more. So I hope that we can maybe take your question up in some classes here and see how we can start training people for public office when they're alumni.
Right.
Because you're right, it's a terrible problem.
Right. Thanks.
And our final question.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Thomas. I am also from the great state of Texas, class of 2008, and I'm, first of all, just very proud of my Smithy, like little Minty, who just came and asked you a question. I'm very proud of who she is as a person. I loved her question. I wanted to say I really appreciate in speaking about the mission of Smith College that you brought up the term feminism. And I think, and I am invested in Smith continuing to not shy away from a political message about what we do here. And I wondered if you, both of you could perhaps speak to, and you have already to a degree, the understanding of a woman's education as a feminist praxis, and the importance of maintaining that lens of looking at what we do and what we continue to support when we support Smith and women's education in general.
Oh, wow. Let's see, where to begin? I can't help but to answer this question through a little story that I have. When I was in South Africa this summer, I was looking at the African National Congress Women's League, and unlike any place in the world, women have 50% majority in both houses of parliament. So I was wondering, what is the opportunity structure that gets women here? It certainly wasn't the education at first, but it was through legal empowerment, through having quotas stated within their constitution, which is very progressive. I did research on women's leadership in education in general, and I think that at a few institutions I went to, they tried to separate feminism from the empowerment of women. And I think that's a very slippery slope, and it's virtually impossible. And you miss a very important aspect of the education. Here at Smith, we're very proud of feminism, and I think that that stems from our ability to address difficult issues. I think it stems from our realistic mindset that there are challenges within this world that need to be accomplished. And I think through that lens of admitting the faults, we construct an environment that's safe for women to succeed. What was the second part of your question?
Just what are your thoughts about, not a recroachment, but like the continued positioning of Smith next to like terms like women's freedom and feminism, like making that a visible connection that we are saying that is what we do at the college, that is part of our mission and our goal. We do not just simply send girls to college, but we are about the empowerment of women globally. Like, what do you think about that?
I think that this question comes through, I think Smith articulates this through the constant comparison that occurs within higher education, why is a women's education valid? What is the purpose of a women's college? And you often hear the statement, well, a women's college is not realistic to the real world. You need two genders together in order for it to be a legitimate education. So I think through this continual upbringing of this rhetoric, our stance for feminism, our stance for empowering women becomes stronger and stronger. And now in the 21st century, we've adjusted that rhetoric towards the empowerment of women on an international level. So I think within every era of leadership, of every era that this college is in existence, and the changing of the student body, that becomes different and stronger. I hope that answers your question. Okay, somewhat.
Your question's a very, very important one. And I'm sure there would be 20 or 30 different answers around the room. My answer to you is, at least when I was president of Smith, I believed it was my job to do exactly what Sophia Smith said she wanted to see happen, which was to give women the learning that would enable them to become independent, to contribute to society in many different ways, and to develop what she called their capacity for spiritual growth. Although that wasn't quite her language, that's what she meant. So in my role as president, I thought it was important to give every student here all the tools they needed intellectually to assess the world into which they'd be graduating, and assess it from a variety of points of view. I didn't try to censor the conservative point of view, because that, I believe, is totally antithetical to a free society. So, given that that is part of the mission, I think the coursework that students undertake has to present many different points of view, but I don't think any of us can conceal which ones we personally are passionate about. But I do believe that under our charter, we should be keeping this as an open society rather than oriented toward feminism. And feminism is a vast body of thought. Some of it very authoritarian, some of it very libertarian. And I think my definition of feminism and yours might differ because we're different generations. And so I've always settled for helping students here learn what they wanted to know and understand, and to try and encourage lots of free argument and challenging. I think my view of feminism, for instance, is quite out of date. As I say, I would be happy to change the tax-supporting highways for tolls and put that tax money into childcare. But I don't know whether that's a big issue for some of my successors. Also, it's a very important question whether an institution which is tax exempt can become publicly committed to anything other than free access to all kinds of opportunity for women, and teaching in the field of politics and economics and social sciences about some of the biases that exist in knowledge in those fields as they are presented today. So I think, for instance, that there should possibly be student clubs which are absolutely committed to the kind of advocacy you represent and I support, but so should the conservative point of view. And I feel that that's about the only way we, in each generation, will get people to think profoundly about those issues. So I think we, as an institution, have always stood for access to education for women of the highest quality. And with that access comes the capacity to criticize your society and decide on acting about it. It may be a wishy-washy answer, but that's what I really think.
It's a very good answer. No, thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our conversation and our interview with Jill Kerr-Conway. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill and Yasmin, for concluding our celebration with a perfect illustration of Smith's proud history, its exciting future, and the ties that bind the two. Your conversation reminds us of the unwavering and long-standing bonds that connect Smith across the generations, something that comes to life so powerfully every year during Ivy Day. Smith, as one of the members of our alumni board has said, is not just a college, it's a movement. A vision that took shape in the mind and the conscience of a New England woman almost 150 years ago to increase women's power for good through education. This weekend, we've heard from many members of the Smith community who have ensured Sophia Smith's legacy. We've heard our remarkable students talk about their experiences in classrooms, study abroad, community service, praxis internships, programs such as the Coral Reef Science and Education Program in Belize, and global engagement seminars in Costa Rica, Greece, and Jerusalem. Last night, we heard Coulter scholar Faith Kamalo's moving story. Faith is here because of the scholarship program that the Coulter Foundation established in 2005 to provide scholarships to Smith to women from less developed nations, very similar to Joan Fletcher Lane's gift. Susan Racher, class of 1975 and vice president and chief financial officer of the foundation, writes, "Their stories are remarkable. Stories of family sacrifice to raise the funds for US visas, stories of studying physics with a flashlight at night in a safe house church amidst war outside, of residents in refugee camps, stories of parents who were ostracized for directing their daughter toward education rather than an arranged teenage marriage, of being orphaned at a young age, of having to parent young siblings. Each woman has a remarkable story of her pathway to Smith. Even more remarkable is their success as members of the Smith community and their success after graduation as leaders in their professional fields and communities. It's philanthropy that has made this possible." You've heard our faculty. We began this weekend Thursday with the Sherrod Distinguished Teaching Awards ceremony, celebrating the excellent teaching that's the very core of who we are and what we do as a college. You've heard our faculty throughout the weekend as they've talked about their work with students, both inside and outside the classroom. Quite simply, teachers transform lives, as many of you can attest. Again, your philanthropy supports our faculty through endowed chairs, research funds, and the teaching awards themselves, a generous gift from Jay and Kathy Sherrod, who are delighted to ensure that we call attention to outstanding teaching on an ongoing basis. Most important, you've heard each other and seen tangible evidence again and again in your own lives and achievements of the power of Smith women. You've seen Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy's Oscar-winning documentary about the efforts to help women in Pakistan suffering brutal acid attacks. You've heard Trudy Rubin and Sherbano Tazir, courageous journalists from classes 45 years apart, talk about their own work in the Middle East. You've heard Jane Harmon and Farah Pandith talk about the Women in Public Service Project that the traditional sisters colleges have embarked on with the State Department. Jane and Farah have been and will continue to be key to this effort. You've heard Laura Tyson talk about the work she's done at Davos, seeking to address the global gender gap. You've heard former ambassadors April Foley and Carol Rodley and Foreign Service Officer Jane Messenger. You've heard educational pioneers Huneng Ku, Alison Overseth, Nano Chatfield, and Erin McGurn. You've heard legislator Lyle Gibbons and experts in global health Catherine Webb and Shamiran Fanglass. Janet McKinley has talked about her work with global poverty as chair of Oxfam, and Judith Chen, Doris Deng, Ivy Fredericks, and Carolyn Stratoff have shared their insights about China's economy. Indeed, we've seen powerful evidence of the impact that Smith women are having on the world. Their journeys, your journeys, were shaped in important ways at Smith. Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy made her first film as an independent project as a senior in our Khan Institute. Farah Pandith was SGA president. Trudy Rubin and Jane Harmon got their taste of political life in organizing a rally for Hubert Humphrey in the 1964 presidential election. Jane wrote home to her parents after the event, "I'm flying. Never have I been so sure of my love for politics, for organizing, for leading." Smith medalist Shirley Sagawa credits her career in politics to the advice of a professor telling her to take an internship in Washington. Likewise, Laura Tyson credits her career, as you heard yesterday, in economics to the encouragement of her Smith professor to get a PhD. Their dreams and aspirations mirror Sophia's own hope by education to increase women's power for good. Women's wrongs will be addressed, she wrote in her will, their wages adjusted, and their weight of reforming the evils of society greatly increased. Today we have the opportunity, and I believe the responsibility, to extend the reach and power of Sophia Smith's dream. She gave her fortune to achieve it, and we have the chance to give of our fortune to continue her vision. We choose to do this work not for ourselves, nor even solely for Smith's greater good. We choose to do it for women around the world so that they, like you, can experience the transformative impact of a Smith education. We choose to do it because the world needs women to be the leaders that they are meant to be. We accept our responsibility with courage and conviction to continue Sophia's legacy, educating women for the world, making Smith a perennial blessing to it. Our time is now. Our mandate is clear. Smith is a movement of which we can all be proud, a movement that will change the world if we all do our part. I ask you to join with me to be Smith's voice in the world. Whenever you can, spread the good word about Smith. Embrace and leverage our community. Connect to your classmates, attend Smith events, and enhance the Smith network, reaching a hand forward and a hand back. And lastly, invest in Smith. Your gift, no matter its size, helps us to accomplish our goals, ensuring that we can offer any talented, smart, and ambitious young woman who seeks a Smith education the support she needs to grow into the leader she aspires to be, a woman for the world. Our goal is ambitious, $450 million, but we must reach high. The need is urgent. We need more educated women ready to lead at all levels of society. We as a community have the chance to once again do what so many Smith women have done before, change the world for the better. You heard our students, the Smith women of today. This is a necessary endeavor, and we are up for the challenge. They are ready. We are ready. The world is ready. Together, let's show the world the true power of Smith women. Please join me in supporting Women for the World, the campaign for Smith. Thank you.